Hey everyone, Nate the Nerdarch here from Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds, and today we're going to discuss using real world political, religion, and regional issues in your actual game. So the good and the bad and the ugly of using that.
Of current events.
Of current events. And with me I have.
I'm Ted.
Dave.
So, I can think of several things. I mean, pretty much every day you read in the news some kind of
Horrible.
horrible political, horrible genocide, some kind of something somewhere. Someone's getting killed or attacked or taken away for political reasons, for religious reasons, or because they're hungry.
I think that the great part about this is you can go to the grandiose or the minute and be able to get inspiration. You pull out, if you still use one a newspaper or, look at, news articles online, and you can grab a tiny detail and that can give you a story arc for a session or a story arc for an entire, campaign and work with it. Oh, this little girl was kidnapped and, in real life it's, oh my God, horrible. But if you've got the whole story, you've got all of the pieces, you just need to change the setting and be able to incorporate that into a fantasy game or whatever genre you're using, and be able to make that into your own game. Change the details to match whatever it is that you need. Insert your heroes, let them solve the story.
So, instantaneous story arc.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not only that too. Like you have, there's so many different ways to get the information too. Like you said, newspaper if you still do that, magazines, online, social media.
Absolutely.
Radio, TV. So like there is no shortage of how to get this information. And if say you're crunched for time, like you're driving to and from work, you can put on news and be like, oh, you know what, and get my ideas for gaming. Although it's kind of really messed up and dark and horrible if you think about this. But
to that, I mean, it is a definite con. If a story happens to ring true to somebody in your game and they pick up on it, I mean, you might crush them. It's like, dude,
I don't think I'd. Oh, go ahead.
This is really eating at my heartstrings because I'm affected by the real world event and I'm supposed to be role playing with this here, and my character's not like me and this and that. But I mean, try to avoid things that are going to specifically affect your players.
So con would be emotional attachment.
yeah,
Yes.
You have to be sensitive.
And sensitivity.
Here's another thing that you have to be really careful with drawing from real world inspiration with is anytime you talk religion or politics, real world, it is definitely they're hot buttons to really get people going. So if you're going to introduce these elements into your game, you really have to figure out how can I let this inspire my game with being different enough that my players, not their characters, are going to associate and identify with it so strongly that I can actually break my table, break my gaming group.
There are players, and this is absolutely a major con. Players are going to be or have the potential to be very strongly in their beliefs. So you could sit back and say, okay, well, I introduced this thing here, and this guy's on this side, this guy's on that side, and they're not going to agree. And they start butting heads, and not only is your session for the night totally messed up, but you utterly have the chance of it just ruining your group.
Well, there's that too. But all right, guys, jump in the Wayback Machine with me. Go back to our game table when we used to game down the street from here. And we had a player that was so strongly adverse to religion and was such a hardcore atheism. In game, another character made him do something to basically pay homage to a deity.
Right.
And he got so angry, not in game,
Out
of game.
Oh God.
And I don't forget what he said. Was it an actual threat of physical violence?
Yeah, he was very, very.
Were you there that time?
Yeah, I'm trying to not name names. I'm trying to think.
Well, I mean, I'll give you guys the stories. We had a campaign setting. We've talked about it before, Ulthgania, and the god of the seas was very old.
That's what you had to do it to get on a boat, right?
And if you were,
I was there.
If you stepped onto a boat, it was a superstitious that if you did not pay homage to the god, the voyage was going to be cursed.
Yeah,
and that bad stuff
you
could
had
happen.
to give him minor tribute, like a
Right.
copper piece. Yeah, it was more of the action than it was the value of what you're doing. It was all about
The basic tagline
The
was
cosmic vending
please
machine."
maltrate us, don't sink us. You know, that was the easiest thing to do. Just say that while you're walking on board, and all's great. And the character we've had at the game before, who this is the dude who we've talked about, totally busted into song at the table. The actual player, he played a bard, and he did a bardic inspiration or whatever it was in third edition that basically he got a charmed effect, and he made that character
or a cast charm person or something. It's some kind
whichever.
of thing.
He did a charm effect, and he made that character go through that homage so that the voyage would not be cursed. And when he did it, I mean, the player, he said what he had to say, but he stood up, he threw the chair back, he left the room for 10 minutes.
Came back, and I think he threatened the other player. I think
He's like, if you ever do that again, I'm gonna...
He was a Marine recruiter. He wasn't like really physically imposing, but he was a Marine recruiter. Apparently, at the time, that was his job. And I think he put his finger in the other guy's chest, and he's like, I will fucking kill you if you ever do something like that again.
Really, I don't remember it being that violent.
And,
but whatever.
and he wasn't talking about in-game.
Yeah, I mean, this was a total out of game. I was the DM of this game at the time, and I'm kind of like shrinking back against the walls, like, what's gonna happen here?
This guy always brought a lot of interest to our group. I mean, he took them all and smashed the D20 that was performing
Performing badly.
Yeah, he took dice shame to the execution level.
Yeah, he actually, we were gaming one time and we found out he had a top plate because he went to say something and his teeth went
Oh, he's
flying.
laughing. He was laughing.
Oh yeah.
And the top plate with the two teeth attached come landing and land right in the middle of the table.
Yeah, then you could have heard a pin drop at that point. We're like, what just happened? Nate was like, oh my god, I think he just threw his tongue. It was like the scene from Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street when the hot chick uses her tongue to wrap the guy up in the bed.
Didn't see that.
No, not a Nightmare on Elm Street fan.
No.
So obviously, you can clearly have hot button issues at your table. So, to wrap it up, you've got ease of information, a multitude of plots and scenarios that you can use.
Plot scenarios, hooks. There's plenty.
There's loads of it, and it can fit into any theme, any genre. Just pick it up, change the necessary details, drop it in, done. You've got what you need. But on the other side of it, you got to be careful. You got to make sure that you've changed it enough that you're not using names or things, and know your players, because if they can't handle certain things, like, hey, I am that far removed from God stuff.
There's that, and like if there's real world situations that your players have been in that you want to use, like, so they might be sensitive to it. Maybe you should just ask them, like, hey, I've been in online games where we've had Vietnam vets in the game, and another player is like, well, I was going to role play a character with post traumatic stress. Is that okay? Will that are you okay with that?
Right.
And got permission. And as the DM too, you want to think, like, sometimes too, like, certain DMs would use this as an opportunity to make fun of, take pot shots, satire, whatever, and because they have kind of the pulpit to do it. But you don't, at the end of the day, we're playing a role-playing game. You should be playing it with your friends, hopefully, or people that will become your friends. So you don't want to do anything that's harmful or hurtful to anyone at your table.
Absolutely.
So you should figure out if there are certain situations that are not comfortable with your players. I mean, this always boils back down to DM player expectations, and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, as a DM, you always have the ability to just take a 5 minute or a couple minutes aside, talk to players individually, and say, hey, what is your take on this? Can you handle this? And if you're not used to those players, just take that short amount of time and make sure it's all going to fly.
Yeah, you don't want to introduce that stuff cold.
Right.
And I would also say that with current events, something that's really fresh in people's mind, especially if it was if general populace knows it, then that's another thing where it's like, well, if you change it enough, they might never know.
Right.
But I would never actually tell them, hey, I got inspired by this terrible atrocity that occurred in real life, and be like, oh wow, it really doesn't make me feel that good.
You're like that, that Nigeria thing is pretty sweet. I thought I'd throw it in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of stuff, I would just never really tell the players that's what I was like. I mean, I did a disease thing, and I got inspired by. I mean, there's real life diseases that are harming people and getting to be epidemic levels. And at that point, it's kind of like, well, it's
Nate
prominent.
was like, Ebola, excellent.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you came along, Ebola. I just wanted to write a disease thing. Yeah, and my thing is nothing like the disease Ebola, but I thought, why not make some kind of disease in a game? And like, I'm sure people are thinking about it. So that's kind of like the start for it. But I would never I would not make a religious war, for example, in my game that really mimics any religious wars going on in real life. Regardless of every...
I'm not going to introduce the Catholics group, and start a holy war. But yeah.
I mean, everybody at the table could be atheists or pagans or Catholics or whatever, and we could all be the same thing. But at the same time, it's just like, well, so I'm not really technically going to offend anybody by having some kind of counter to that. But I mean, I was not expecting someone to get really upset about the atheism thing, but
and you really don't know what's going to trigger people. Like,
yeah,
I had made an offhand comment in our Minotaur video about someone perceiving the Minotaur as being bipolar or having a bipolar disorder because of and I was just using it kind of as an analogy of vast mood swings, and I had someone comment on it, asking me to refrain from doing that because in their mind it almost seemed like they didn't want me to come off as saying, well, bipolar people are bullies and something along those lines. I'm misquoting it for sure, but and they were really decent about it, so like some forethought or whatever. And I looked at it, I'm like, I really don't think so, but maybe it does bother that person, or maybe it does bother other people. So that same thing kind of goes back to your on your table, which is a smaller group. So it's just about being conscious and aware of who's at your table and what's going on.
Right. So I think
so pretty big con. Without prep.
So I think issues are covered.
I think we've wrapped this one up nicely. You guys can like, comment, subscribe, and share.
You can check us out on nerdarchy.com.
You can also check us out on the subreddit Nerdarchy.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.